Now, welcome to another edition of Battle of the Heroes and Villains, where this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll for R2-D2, then comparing his score to all the other characters we've done thus far, before I then read and respond to some of your comments. But first, you can of course already nominate and or vote for which character we do next by heading down and responding to my pinned comment below with a character name, or voting with a thumbs up if the one you'd like to see is already listed. Whichever comment gets the most votes in the next 24 hours or so will be the winner. That said, let's get to the results of this poll, where we'll see that 80% of people gave R2-D2 an A, another 14% then thought he was B tier material, 4% gave him a C, which left 1% to give him a D, and a final 1% to give him an F. Which then means when we do all the math here and consider A a score of 5 and F a score of 1, R2-D2 ends up with an average score of 4.71, which puts him into 3rd place overall, and only behind heavy hitters Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, am I at all surprised by these results? No, not really. Maybe he scored a touch higher than I thought he would, but pretty much everyone does love R2, and his importance to Star Wars cannot be overstated, as we'll soon discuss in the comments. And speaking of those, as usual, thanks to everyone who does vote, comment, and watches the videos. It is all greatly appreciated. And now let's get to it and start, as we always do, with the top-rated comment, which this time came to us from Jessica A., who said, "I couldn't imagine Star Wars without him. He's easily one of the most vital characters to the saga as a whole, and without his courage and quick thinking, it would have ended countless times. He's really an unsung hero, possibly the most underrated in the franchise. I can hardly think of another character that went through so much with such a steadfast devotion. He fought side by side with Anakin and watched him turn. He witnessed the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire. He was present for many of the most defining moments in galactic history. And unlike C-3PO, he remembered all of it and still went on to save the rebellion and Anakin's descendants. He's a perfect embodiment of undying loyalty. Some might claim my vision is clouded by nostalgia, and that's honestly fair. However, while I generally try to be somewhat objective on these polls, I'm unapologetically caving into my personal bias in this case. R2-D2 is probably my favorite sidekick in all of fiction, but let's be real here. He's a hero in his own right. A. And that was pretty much perfectly said and summed up the character so well we could probably call it a video right here. But instead of doing that or responding to what you had to say, which would mainly just be me reiterating, I think, let's get to some more comments that touch on some of these points you made, as well as a few others, starting with this one from Andrew Borders, who said, "To take a character that could have just been a plot device as the vessel for the Death Star plans, give him a truckload of personality, and make him an essential part of the saga, now that is legendary. This is probably the easiest A I've ever voted here." Then there's also this comment from Adab, who said, "One of the only consistently A-tier characters in Star Wars. The dude can speak without speaking and is understandable without words. Best droid." Also here we have this comment from Borba Fett, who said, "Every aspect of R2-D2's design is genius. Just how does one make a can of wheels that doesn't talk so iconic and charismatic?" Then there's this comment from Ice P, who said, "He's like Chewbacca. Even though he has no dialogue, something about it just works." And I think these comments maybe touch on the most impressive thing about Star Wars, and I'm mainly talking about that first movie here. That all these crazy things and ideas just worked, and that the right decisions were made at virtually every turn. That on paper it might all kind of look and sound ridiculous, and there were plenty of people who had their doubts in what Lucas was doing, even some people working with him, and it could have easily ended up being this really cheesy movie that would have long since been forgotten, but instead it ended up being almost the perfect movie. Instead it catches the proverbial lightning in a bottle, and is something that has and will continue to endure. I mean, R2 is essentially this blue and white canister on wheels with the late great Kenny Baker inside that beeps and boops and whistles, and he hangs out with this golden plated humanoid looking droid who's all haughty and annoying most of the time, and it just, for whatever reason, works. Then there's things like Darth Vader and his incredible design, even though if Star Wars was made today, I'm sure Vader's design would be more sleek and fluid, and he'd probably be all CGI, and he'd move really fast and do all these cool things that he didn't do in the original trilogy. But anyway, the guy playing Darth Vader, who was David Prowse, of course, has this rather high-pitched and very proper-sounding English voice, so they dub over it with the amazing voice of James Earl Jones. Which, no offense to David Prowse, was maybe the best decision ever made. Anyway, my point is the first Star Wars movie could have gone wrong in so many different ways, but instead, again, it all just kind of works. And I do think the presence of actors like Peter Cushing and Sir Alec Guinness helped that quite a bit, that they do bring a presence and a level of seriousness that was absolutely needed, and helped ground the movie and keep it from feeling too fantastic or out there, if you will. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling and getting off topic, so before I keep going with this, let's get to the next comment about R2-D2, which comes to us from Hardly Common, who said, R2-D2, despite never being able to utter a word, is one of the greatest characters in Star Wars. His character design is top-notch, and the fact that George involved him so heavily throughout both trilogies and the Clone Wars shows how important he was to the story. The sequel trilogy moved on from him, and while BB-8 was a fun addition, you don't get him without R2 paving the way. Again, he never says a word, but I really missed his presence and humor in the sequel trilogy. Plus, he's a badass droid, especially for being an astromech, A+ for me. Then we also have this comment here from Pigs Are Cool 626, who said, although he was way too underused in the sequels, I don't think they ruined him. R2 will always be the greatest droid in Star Wars. He is one of the first things when I think of when you say Star Wars. He has a service record of 70+ years and is still going strong. Next then, we also have this comment from Sombra Memmer, who said, an A, though let's be honest, he was shoehorned into the prequels when they could have made a different droid with a similar personality. Same with 3PO. Also this comment then from Christian Villavicencio, who said, it's a shame how they wasted such an emblematic character in the new trilogy. Okay, so first of all, I do think it was a little strange that R2 and 3PO weren't what you could call the central droids of the sequel trilogy, that BB-8 sort of took their place, which isn't a knock on BB-8. I thought he was fine for the most part. And I know that was mostly done because Disney thought they had a really marketable design and idea on their hands, so they pushed him really hard. But the problem is, for the story, it just makes way more sense to stick with the tried and true R2 and 3PO. And not that you couldn't have added a new droid like BB-8 and gave him a pretty significant role, but I don't think a new droid should have essentially taken the whole spotlight away from the other two. I mean, sure, R2 and 3PO have their moments in the sequels, don't get me wrong, but by the way Lucas sort of bent over backwards to make sure the duo were not only in the prequels, but a big part of them, to me that says them being in it is very important to him, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. And sure, some things in the prequels, like 3PO being made by Anakin, were a little odd, and that R2 just so happened to be on Queen Amidala's ship was really convenient. But again, to me, it just shows how important they are to the story, and also to the Skywalkers. And so them not being in the sequels prominently, it just feels like we were losing out on something. Alright, that then kind of brings us to this comment from Culture Cantina, who said, one of the greatest choices George Lucas made was making the MacGuffin of the original Star Wars an actual character. The Death Star plans are obviously important, but making them a part of a character who is cute and likable to the audience makes us care even more in the adventure. R2-D2 does so much for the plot of Star Wars just by being the MacGuffin and a great character. Then there's also this comment from Infinite Donuts, who said, some have speculated up until the sequel trilogy that Star Wars is told through his eyes. R2 has been there to see it all. The character is so well done for what he is, and I can't stand the thought of giving him anything other than an A+. Then there's also this one from Bertrand Shaline, who said, George Lucas said it himself. Ultimately, R2 is the true hero of Star Wars. And well, according to the book How Star Wars Conquered the Universe, George Lucas did say that the entire story of Star Wars is being recounted by R2-D2 to the keeper of the Journal of the Whills some 100 years after the events of Return of the Jedi. Which would mean that, yes, R2 is basically the one who tells the story of Star Wars. And I always thought it would be kind of cool, albeit maybe a little cheesy, if Star Wars quote-unquote ended someday with R2 after having floated through space for who knows how long, crash lands on Earth and is found by a young George Lucas, who then starts to write Star Wars. Alright, and moving on then, turns out there wasn't universal, unabashed praise for R2-D2 in the comments, so let's get to one from Mr. H, who had a bit of a more critical take on him, and said, oh my frick, I'm genuinely surprised that I'm a minority on C tier. There's little to no character development, he just stays R2 the whole time. That being said, he's snarky and sarcastic, which I like. I'm sorry, but based upon the films alone, I have to go with C. There's not much to him in the films. However, in the extra content, with that, I'd give him a B. He even gets somewhat of a character arc in the series of episodes on the Clone Wars, where they send that droid team to get something, and we meet Gregor. Anyway, C tier without the extra content, B tier with it. And I mean, fair enough, there really isn't character progression out of R2. He's pretty much the same droid at the start that he is at the end. But I think in this case, most people are sort of judging him based off his place or importance in the story, along with just his unique and likable nature, and the fact that he really is an icon of Star Wars. I mean, he's one of those characters that just is Star Wars, and can and will be recognized by people who really know next to nothing about the franchise. And so again, I can't and won't argue against the fact that R2 never really changes or grows as a character, and as I always say, everyone is free to judge these characters how they want or on whatever basis they want. But in this case, I'd actually say that him not changing is maybe actually one of the best things about him, that he's always this loyal droid that gets our heroes out of jams from time to time, that even though he can be a bit snarky at times, he absolutely always does what is right and what must be done. And kind of going along with all that, we have this comment here from Christopher Mitchell, who said, I love Luke's line about never seeing such devotion in a droid before, and then comparing that to the Clone Wars arc where nobody understands Anakin's determination to get R2 off the Separatist battleship. He loves because he has been loved. R2 is an honorary Skywalker. And I think that's a great and interesting point, because even though I'm sure droids are programmed to be loyal to their owners, as Luke points out, R2 seems to go above and beyond just programming, and part of that does maybe come from the loyalty and commitment that has been consistently shown to him as well. And so in this odd sort of way, Anakin's devotion to R2 and his unwillingness to let him go in that Clone Wars arc perhaps ends up translating into R2's devotion to Luke and his friends down the road. And without that help from R2, Luke and company never made it through all their difficulties in the trilogy, which then means Luke never makes it to the end where he saves Anakin. So in this roundabout way, Anakin's kindness and loyalty to a droid turns out to be a big factor in saving him one day. Okay, and now let's get to just a few final comments here before wrapping this up, starting with this one from The Wanderer, who said, the only character whose every word is censored. Then this comment from Vicky, who said, what I really like about R2-D2 is the fact that he wasn't in the original trilogy just because of marketing purposes. He was in them because he is a character who's important to the story. Easy A+ for him. We also then have this one from Yusha Ryder, who said, R2 is exactly what I want in a side character. He bounces off the cast well, he's important while mostly staying in the background, and he's incredibly memorable. Then we got this one from Sosa Bird, who said, he war-crimed a super battle droid. And then this one from Richie, who said, I've been waiting for R2's turn since the beginning. He has literally saved every main character's life throughout the first 6 films. Star Wars wouldn't exist if it wasn't for him. He never gets the credit he deserves. He is the true hero of Star Wars. Also, we have this one from Christopher Wickline, who said, he is the droid we're looking for. Next, then, this one from Josh Anderson, who said, he's the hero and the heart of Star Wars. Hands down, one of the most beloved and iconic characters of that galaxy far, far away. A+ without a doubt. And then finally here we have this comment from Fighting Falcon 777, who said, A+ easily. Who doesn't love R2? He's quirky, adventurous, loyal to the end, and not afraid to speak his central processing unit through his iconic beeps, boops, and whistles. R2 has a clear personality, which is impressively expressed considering he doesn't have a facial expressions or a regular voice to speak through. Plus, we all know R2 is the real hero of Star Wars. How many times would the main characters have been killed if R2 hadn't pulled some magical tool out of his utility chassis to save the day? Very well said, and you're certainly not going to get an argument against any of that from me, because when you really think about it, R2 is one of the most important characters in Star Wars. Not only does he tell the story, but it wouldn't have gone that way if not for him and his bravery, and he really is an unsung hero. But the great thing about R2 is that I don't think he cares about getting the credit or recognition, which is part of what makes him a true hero. Again, he just does what must be done. He's the closest thing to a Jedi a droid could probably ever be. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think of R2, or what I or anyone else had to say about him in this video, or you can head down to the comments and nominate or vote for which character we do next. Either way, do leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.